And now we are officially in season 2 of Anything to Declare.
I've been thinking that this entire time. I never told you, but like the first 5 or 6 episodes we did, I guess was season 1. And
yeah, and we would have kept going, but unfortunately life happens, and we run out of stuff to talk about. Well, not really. We've always been able to find stuff to talk about, but life just happens because we're fathers.
Yeah, we're grown dudes with kids. My 18-month-old is upstairs giving Tara a run for her money, I'm sure.
Well, we are starting out season 2 very strongly because we have the amazing Victor Bevine joining us. Victor is a novelist. He's an actor, but most importantly, he is known for narrating. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Victor, but over 180 books.
It's actually closer to like 300 now.
Oh my God.
Yeah, when you count all the because I also have a pseudonym that I narrate some of them under, because I do a couple of romance series, so I like to keep those separate, and I have that's under the name Max Belmore is my romance pseudonym.
You know, that almost reminds me of a name from Castlevania. I don't know why.
Any significance to that?
Yeah, you know how you come up with your porn name is supposed to be your first pet and the first street you lived on.
Oh yeah.
So the first pet would have been Lady Belmore. That wouldn't have worked. But Max was my dog in college. So I always liked that name. So yes, it was Max is my dog, and then Belmore was the first street I lived on Long Island.
Nice.
Yeah.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
Max has actually been nominated for a bunch of Audis. And you know, I obviously have to go in his stead, and I always think that if were I to win, he's been nominated like 4 times, and were I to win, I'd have to say, in accepting the award for Max Belmore is Victor Bevine, his doppelganger. So yeah, but I've done about 300 books, and I presume, you know, you guys are really into the Legend of Drizzt, so that I think is up to about 40. I think I've done 40 of those.
Well, I'm way more into it than he is. I am now, man, I just bought the physical copies of the transitions because I wasn't going to listen to it if you weren't narrating it. I tried I can't remember who it was that narrated these, and he's not bad.
Mark Bramhall.
Yeah, he's not bad.
He's a nice actor. I used to be in a theater company with him in Los Angeles.
Right, and there was a guy I can't remember the guy who did the Hunter Blades trilogy. I really struggled with him because
I never listened to those. That was the other thing that Bob did, right? When he tried to take a break from the Drizzt.
Yeah, and no, actually, those were that's the one with the set with 4 with Servant of the Shard and the ones with Jarlaxle and Trary.
No, I did those. I mean, I think there were only 3 of the Drizzt books that I didn't do. And how that happened, if you want to hear that story.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that they started recording those for some reason. Those were the first ones they recorded. And before I came on board, and they didn't go in sequence. And then for some reason, I don't know whether the fans didn't like him or for some reason, Mark just was not popular and they wanted to recast the narrator. So they actually did, Wizards of the Coast did a crowdsourcing. They approached Audible because that's who had the contract at that time, and Audible put me and 2 other people forward as suggestions, and we had to tape an audition piece, and then the same audition piece, and then the 3 audition pieces from the 3 guys was put on the Wizards of the Coast website, and the fans chose me by about, I think I got 58%, which is pretty good. You have 3 people.
That is awesome. Was David Kalaki one of them?
No,
because he did the Road to the Patriarch, which I'm on now, and he actually is pretty good.
Okay.
He does a really good job with it. I love his dwarves, and I love your dwarves too. And that's when you get far enough in this series, it's like you judge these guys on their dwarves because they're such a huge part of it.
Yeah, I mean it's hard because they're all, you know, you make them all sound sort of like drunken Irishmen, and
Right. Absolutely.
and then but you've got to make them sound different enough that you can tell who's talking.
Well, there was one part I noticed. I can't remember which book it was, but you were narrating three dwarves at once, and I kind of felt like you realized, I've got to do three dwarves at once. And I noticed that your Bruner was a little bit higher pitch. Now, don't get me wrong, you did a really good job of differentiating them, but because it was such a strange situation where three dwarves arguing all at once, that your Bruner was a little bit higher, and you had to make your highs and your mediums and your lows like more pronounced.
A little more pronounced, yeah. And then the female dwarves, you know, because they all sound like drunken Irishmen too.
Right.
You know, so it's just making those at least finding an original way, because they, you know, half of them have beards. So finding an original way to make the female sound distinctive as well. But I love all the characters. I mean, you know, I really honestly, I'm not just saying this because it's my bread and butter, but I sincerely love when it comes time to do another one. I love getting back to the world and the characters. I love doing Drizzt monologues.
Dude, you have created such a loyal fan base. I mean, it's crazy. And my favorite thing that you do personally is Jarlaxle, because your Jarlaxle has this little pompous, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but you've got this little pompous way of using his voice, and it's just so perfect. Yeah. And the one thing I've noticed that David Kalaki did differently was he kind of made Jarlaxle's voice a little lower and regal sounding. Yours just fits him better.
He's just, because he's kind of a fop, you know.
He is. He's just
a dandy. He's like from that tradition of the British detective novels from the 19th century, where the detective would often be a bit of a dandy, you know, that because he loves to dress, he loves his hats, so he's got that sort of foppish, pretentious quality to him.
Pretentious, that's the word I was looking for.
But I mean, I'll tell you, I shouldn't really give away all my secrets, but the way I created his voice is a really funny story. I'm like I'm terrible with impersonations. I'm just like the worst actor in the world when it comes to impersonating other actors, famous actors. So sometimes what I will do to create a character voice is I'll impersonate an actor. And
that's exactly what I do.
Nobody ever recognizes who it is because it's so bad.
Well, that's the exact method I use, because I narrate too. I've done 3. So nice. My first real impression that I tried was Walter White from Breaking Bad. And I didn't know it doesn't sound anything like him. So that's funny that you mentioned that, because I thought.
But it's great because it gives you a reference that you can always go back to. Well, I'm going to do that impersonation again. And so Jarlaxle, you're never going to believe who Jarlaxle was.
Oh.
You'll never guess. Never in a million years.
Jack Torrance from The Shining. I know that's not it, but.
No, earlier. John Wayne.
Really?
Yeah.
You're right. I would have never guessed.
It's so bad. It's just not even close. But now it's just Jarlaxle. But when I have to reach for him a little bit, I just remember my bad John Wayne impersonation.
That is awesome.
And I find Jarlaxle. And then Artemis, I love doing Artemis too, you know. And so when I did start doing them, the first book I did was they had me do the next book that was coming out before I went back to the first book, to Homeland, and started from there. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure the first book I did was Gauntlgrim.
Really? That's way later. That's even further than I am right now.
It was way later. It was the book at the time, which is like 7 years ago, that was just coming out then. And then I did 20 or so in order from number one and just skipping over the 3 that Mark did. Yeah, and then it just, and now Audible no longer has that contract, so I do there. Now
so how long do you think it took you to do the 30 or so Drizzt books that you've done so far, or so far?
Well, it's about 40 now, and
40.
yeah, and the original. So Audible came to me and they said, "All right, you got it. Fans chose you. Can you commit to this? Because it's like 24 books." And I said, yes. I said, you have to do 2 things for me. You have to give me the same studio, because that's also what all the voice files would be on that one computer. And then, and the same engineer. And they said, fine. So I did them basically. It took me almost 2 years to get through them. Occasionally they'd pull me off to do another book, but it took me about 2 years to do all those. And then I had one period where I went off. I did an acting job in Russia, so I was in Russia for 2 months. And but yeah, it took me the better part of 2 years. And then now it's just basically 1 a year, pretty much. When they come along, and I get notice a few months early, and like they told me, now the next one's coming. It's probably going to be in July.
Well, if anybody listens to this that is actually learning about audio recording, because like I said, I do it too, and I've only gotten 3, and that's taken me about a year and a half. 2 years for that many books, I don't know how you did that.
Yeah, because man. I mean, I don't know if you've ever checked out my other titles, but last year my big book last year was, I did a 5,000-page history of New York, Pulitzer Prize-winning history of New York, called Gotham and Greater Gotham, a 2-part series.
I would be terrified to take on a project like that.
That was 4 months.
Jeez. So do you put in do you just put in 8 hour, 10-hour days to?
No. You can't do that. I find the most I can do, it starts being diminishing returns if I do more than 4 days a week, and they're usually 5 to 6 hour sessions.
And I wish I could do that. I find myself really trying to balance just kids and my real job.
Yeah. Well, I don't work at home. I go to the studio.
So maybe that's my problem.
Yeah.
I do everything on my own computer. I use Audacity, and you said you had an editor. I never even thought of that. I just do it myself. And
oh yeah, no. A lot of people now self-record. A lot of really well-known artists self-record, but I just don't want to do it. I've completely resisted it because I don't want to split my focus. I don't want to have to think about doing quality control, at the end, and then. I'd rather somebody. I mean, I stop myself a lot when I know I've mumbled a word or something. I'll stop, but I want somebody else to really be in charge of that, and then just let me know when the pickups are ready for me to go in and fix. And so I'm lucky enough. A lot of people aren't fortunate enough to really always get an engineer, and I do. So
well, it shows too, because I can do one chapter at my computer at my house with sitting the same way, my microphone the same distance from my face, and I can do one chapter of whatever I'm doing one day. The next day I can do the same thing, repeat every process, and it sounds completely different. And it's frustrating. And you have achieved this consistency where I'd already been through Homeland, so I didn't actually listen to your narration of that one, but I just checked it out on YouTube, and it sounds exactly the same. So this consistency is, it works. And, if your editor is to thank for that, I could see why you've done it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, again, it's, and plus I just, as I have another business, I'm not sure if you know about that. I'm happy to tell you.
The parkour, I meant to list that one as well.
Yeah, the parkour, and that, I work from home, because we've got about 10 people on staff now, but we all work remotely, and I just don't want to be alone any more than I'm already alone. I want to, I like going into the studio and seeing everybody and having the engineer to joke around with, and I've known most of these engineers. I've worked. I've done dozens of books with them, so they're all good friends and great collaborators. And so at least I feel like I'm telling I'm telling the story to somebody. And then, yeah, my one of my most frequent engineers is actually, I'm teaching an audiobook class for actors in New York right now, and he's taken my class. I invited because he really wants to start getting into narrating, and so I offered to give him the class for free.
So in an audio narration class, because I would probably benefit from anything you veterans have learned over the years.
Same.
What? Yeah, you Joseph, you've been wanting to kind of get into it, but I guess life happens, right?
That's really the story of my story of my life. Life happens. You're talking about benefiting from what's the technical term? Just, is it narrator, or is there something more apropos?
Yeah, narrator, voice artist, but it is, voiceover artist, but it really is, there really are different categories of voiceover artists, and they're all very different skills. And so audio narration is, it's very specific. It's different from commercial voiceover. It's different from animation. It's closest, what I like to say is that it is closest, and people have a leg up if they've been classically trained as an actor. So if they've trained with Shakespeare and anything with heightened language and long blocks of text that you have to make sense of for the listener. And that's the challenge, is how do you simultaneously use sort of vocal tricks to keep the interest and follow the thought for the listener, but then at the same time stay intimate and real.
Right. I can relate to that. This isn't a flex or anything. It always seems to find a way to introduce itself into the dialogue, though. I'm active duty military. I have been for almost 14 years, and somewhere along the line, I got over whatever crippling fear, for lack of a better word, I had when I was in high school in my younger years when it came to public speaking or speaking to anyone in general. We hit it off, but I really just couldn't seem to talk to anybody, especially the female persuasion, without like choking on my tongue or something. And somewhere along the line, I just figured out I can speak in front of people. So I was always the go-to whenever it came to reading military decorations and citations in front of people, and those can be just really they can be really dry, because you're propping up somebody and you're trying to convey the accomplishments of somebody that you more than likely don't know, and you certainly can't fathom what it is that they do because they probably have a different job than you do. And there's just the subject matter itself, like trying to get through it, and just the rigid structure in which these citations are presented. And I've seen so many people stutter and stumble their way through these 12, 15, 18 lines. You're talking about blocks of text. I mean, if you were to break this down, it would probably just be 2 paragraphs. And so many people just, like I said, they swallow and choke on their tongues. I don't know what it is. And I see it kind of the same way, that you're not just reading a bunch of words and sentences. I mean, do this person a little bit of service and actually kind of prop up what they did and kind of read it with some emotion. And that seems to be a real struggle for people, is putting oomph, putting emotion, putting something into what they're doing. And maybe people don't see it as acting. Maybe people don't see it as anything more than reading words on a sheet of paper.
Yeah, I mean, they say, I'm not sure what the other one is. I think it might be heights, but the 2 greatest fears that humans have is fear of heights and fear of public speaking.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, it's true. And so people are terrified of it.
Fortunately, with the narrating, you can go back and edit something that you didn't like.
Yeah.
So there's at least that, because I don't think I could get up in front of a bunch of people and say anything that's more than 2 paragraphs. No way.
Well, I always feel kind of bad, because back when I could get away with, I commissioned a couple years ago. I can't skate by and just, I'll narrate that for you, and call it a day. There's more expected of me now, which is awesome. But I used to just be like, yeah, it's just reading. It's just reading in front of people. What's the big deal? And maybe that was kind of a jerk move on my part, because I guess to some people it really is a big deal, whether it's a crowd of 50 or 500. They just cannot do it. It's crippling.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, to tie this all back together, is that how someone who looks at this industry, because there seems to be a lot of interest in VOA, whether it is animation or just audiobooks, is that where it begins? Is just understanding that the source material, it's not just words on a page. Whether they're going to see you on a camera or not, in this case not, you still have to act it out as if you were going to be on camera.
Oh, absolutely. Even more so, because you don't have visual cues that the face telegraphs or the eyes will telegraph if you're on camera. You don't, you're doing much more, in a way, you're doing more acting when you're doing audio work than you are. I mean, just listen to radio plays, the old radio plays. They're, because it's all going through your voice, and yet you have to make it real. You can't be goofy and overly dramatic, but you want to, and then, it's not just that when you have the big blocks of text is one thing, but then the other challenge is, I had somebody I was working with the other night, and I told them, bring in now for your next piece, bring in something that's got a lot of dialogue. It's got various characters, so we can start doing that. And, it should be the actor's dream that you're getting to play all the characters in a scene, but you got to break it down, just like, I don't know if you guys have ever done any acting training, but you've got to break it down like you would a scene. And, as a scene study class, like what do the characters want? And it's like you're playing, both sides of a chess game.
Yeah, it's something I never looked into in high school. I probably should have at least looked into it a little bit, like doing drama and stuff like that. I think the closest I ever got, I don't know why I remember this so specifically, was reading John Proctor pretty much every day from start to finish. Whenever we would bust that out in English class, I just started being John Proctor, and that was like a given.
The Crucible.
Yes, sir. And it's just, Luke, do you remember Mr. Gaston?
Mr. Gaston.
Yeah.
Now all I remember was that the history teacher that dressed up as whatever he was.
No, I don't remember that guy's name. That was somebody else. But he
was what? He'd like come in as Napoleon or something.
The first day I met this history teacher, he came in Roman armor, the plume, gladius, everything. And every time we started a new unit, he would dress like that. He dressed as a Mongol one time.
Oh my God! What age were you?
Oh, I think this was maybe 10th or 11th grade.
10th grade is world history. Yeah, that's cool. That's amazingly cool. How old was this guy?
Oh, I would say mid 40s. And
wow.
He liked to.
What a nerd.
Oh, he really was.
Total rock star nerd.
He really was, and he liked. I don't know if the school was okay with his curriculum, but he really liked talking about warlords. I mean, I learned more about Genghis Khan than I ever thought I would learn in high school from this guy.
Yeah.
Talking about how he killed so many people that it changed the face of Europe for like ever.
Yeah. And I think it was Genghis Khan. They started the plague, basically. One of the ways they started the plague is they would throw plague-infected bodies over the walls when they were, doing a siege around the city. They were throwing infected bodies into the cities over the walls to spread it further. I mean, the original part of it went through that one boat that came from Constantinople to Genoa, but yeah, Genghis Khan helped as well. I love history, by the way.
I kind of figured that, considering you wrote a novel about World War II. I'm sorry, World War I. I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you too, how is it that at what point do you feel confident that you know enough about this era to actually put yourself in the mind of a character from that period?
You mean the book, as far as the book goes?
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of research. So the book is based on initially an historical essay that I found that I thought was fascinating when I read it. And then the first place it directed me to was there was 3,000 pages of testimony in the National Archives. And my family lives in D.C., so every time I'd go down to see my family, I'd read more of the trial testimony and then make copies and take the copies home. So a lot of the, I don't know if you've read the book, but a lot of the trial stuff is lifted directly out of the transcripts. It's actual testimony. And then I just started, because I knew what the themes were that I wanted to hit and I really wanted to bring forward. So I did a lot of studying about the flu, the Spanish flu, a lot of research in that. I did a lot of research into the women's movement at the time, the suffrage movement, because I wanted that character to really, the wife of the lawyer, to be a suffragette. And you know, the book, have you read the book?
I have not.
No, okay. Well, the main character is a lawyer who winds up defending this priest for sexual misconduct, and the lawyer is really, he's this, you know, 35-year-old privileged white guy who basically sees the world in black and white because that's the way he's been raised. And
sure.
So he basically takes a big, huge risk in his life. He's a Victorian, and he sees all the white privilege, male white privilege, sort of being taken away from him on every side. His wife is, you know, a suffragette, and there's all these sailors in Newport doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and so he takes on this trial, this defense of this minister, because he just has such belief. He believes this minister is like a saint, and he just thinks it's outrageous that people are accusing him of this, and it's his way of fighting back against the forces of chaos that he feels are assaulting the sort of ivory tower that he lives in. And then it's his journey when, by deciding to do that, he goes on an unexpected journey. So I really wanted to find out, as you said, I wanted to really research the period. So I did suffragette, the flu, and then also various kind of the views on sexuality that various groups had at the time, which were all very different from how we look at it, and very different from one another. And so I found it just a fascinating, because I'm sort of a $10 word, but I'm sort of an iconoclast from way back.
That's a good word.
I love disrupting people's given knowledge. You know, the sort of that well, this is just a given. People always believe this, and excuse me, but no, they didn't. No, and so and I think that the way we find wisdom is to kind of overturn a lot of those things for ourselves and find out what's really true.
I think that just ties into global progress anyway, just because I still kind of consider humanity in its, at best, adolescence. I don't think it was that long ago when we thought, I mean, you gotta. Yeah, I think I take into account that it wasn't that long ago where I think bloodletting and doing blood transfusions with goats was just that's what you did because your blood was impure. And I was watching a mini TED Ed on YouTube the other day about how headaches used to be treated, and you would actually drill a hole in your skull to relieve the pressure because that had to have been what the problem was. And I don't think that was all that long ago that people were doing that. So there's a lot of things that you don't have to look that far back to see stark contrasts between how things used to be and how things are today.
Yeah, when you think the Homo sapiens, we've been around like 1 to 2 million years, depends on who you believe, and that it's only been 14,000 years that we stopped hunting and gathering.
Right.
It's only been 2,000 years since Christ was born.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all in the blink of an eye. Have you guys read *Sapiens*?
No, I'm not familiar with that. What's that?
Oh my God, you got to read this book.
*Sapiens*. I'm gonna look this up.
Yep.
Yeah, you got to read it. It's a New York Times bestseller, written by Yuval Harari, who's an Israeli history professor, and it's a history of the human species of Homo sapiens from the time when there were still other hominids around, like Homo erectus was around, Neanderthals were around, and why we sort of dominated, wound up, achieving, getting all the others, sending all the others into extinction and dominating the globe. And then it's a history of humanity since.
Not gonna lie, Victor, I was kind of hoping you narrated it, but
yeah, I looked it
I
up too.
wish I would have been honored. No, and then his next one, which I haven't read yet, is Homo Deus, and talks about how where we're going now with AI and how they really are achieving a kind of, effectively we're becoming like gods, and the control that we have over, the planet and the universe and and creation and things that would have been considered magic and would have gotten you burned as a witch 100 years ago or 200 years ago. Just what we're doing now.
My fiance recently had to have a hysterectomy, and while she was getting prepped for surgery, her doctor was telling me how it all worked, and I just stood there with my jaw on the floor because it's all done with robots, and it's just insane to me what they can do in a hospital room these days.
Yeah,
and that's just years back, my brother broke his finger, and he had to get screws and some kind of brace put into his finger, and just the way that they did that was, and that's a simple operation in the grand scheme of things. It's just crazy how far they've come as far as medicine.
Yeah. And that what Homo Deus talks about in this article that I'm reading right now, a friend of mine shared with me, is about Elon Musk's new project.
Which one? I've heard so many, from launching cars into space to the Tesla vehicles.
Yeah, he's got the Tesla, he's got SpaceX, and then he's got this new one. Let me see. Wait a minute. I've got it up on my computer. Let me. I forget now what it's called. It's basically about the whole idea of creating an actual digital implants in the brain, so that we are using our brains as remote control devices, and that we're communicating with our brains directly from brain to brain. So it's basically taking, and the argument is that we're already cyborgs. We're so connected to our devices. It's just they're outside of our bodies.
Right. They're not quite attached to us just yet.
Yeah. And that this is the next revolution will be bringing that stuff inside of our bodies. And of course, it begs the question of, is there a way for you to maintain your privacy when you do that? Do you have a shut off switch? And that's the thing that scares me about it. But I think it's fascinating. I'm a huge fan. I don't know if you know, have you ever seen the science fiction film Forbidden Planet?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. That's what it's about.
I love that movie.
Yeah, it's an amazing movie. It's so far ahead of its time. And that's what it's about, is communicating, being that this race of beings had imprinted their brains onto this great machine that kind of consumed the whole inside of the planet, and that they had their brains could transmit matter anywhere, just by thinking. So anyway, we're on the verge of a lot of amazing stuff. So
I try to just get online.
You weren't going to be able to get me to talk about anything?
Was that a worry?
Well, you never know. I mean, everybody we've had on so far have been chatterboxes, so we've been pretty fortunate there. The YouTuber Galactic Criminal, when we had him on, I wasn't sure he'd like to talk, but he never shut the hell up. It was awesome. He did the whole podcast himself.
Where do you guys live?
Cincinnati, Ohio.
I'm stationed in Illinois at the moment, but that's where we're from, is old Butler County, Greater Cincinnati.
Cool.
Yeah, we met in high school in French class, and I went out to my locker, and I saw some idiot smacking his head on the door of his locker and having this really strange, awkward laugh that was somehow silent and made his face red at the same time. And
I don't remember that, which means I must have hit my head pretty hard and suffered some sort of mild concussion, because I don't remember any of that. So
whether your face was red from embarrassment or hitting your head, I don't know. But
I think after
Lucas, you just knew you had to be friends with this guy.
Yeah. Well, there was
nobody else too.
Yeah, and then you would introduce yourself as Artemis.
Well, and interestingly enough, that was based on Artemis and Shrary. I'm sure you kind of realize that, Victor.
Which?
So, okay, we we were stupid kids, and we came up with fake names for ourselves, and I used the name Artemis,
Oh yeah.
obviously, because he was the coolest character. And what made me like Artemis what made me like Artemis when I was a kid is not why I like him now, because there's actually a lot going on with him where I currently am in the story, and he's actually kind of showing some humanity, which I probably would not have liked when I was a kid, but I like it more now because it just seems more real.
Yeah, he's really Drizzt's shadow.
Mm-hmm.
He's inverted. I mean, he's got the same ethical issues, but that's why Drizzt is so kind of at the same time that he competes with him, he's so compelled to protect him at a certain level, because he's what Drizzt could have been.
There was and him and Jarlaxle together.
Yeah.
I hope that never stops. There was one line, and it was the Promise of the Witch King, and the way you delivered it had me laughing so hard. A bunch of halflings were looking over Jarlaxle's body for magic items, and this halfling that was searching him just kind of went into a seizure because he couldn't believe how much magic this dude had on him.
Yeah.
And then Artemis says, "I should have killed you in Kalimport." It was just the way that you said it. I was laughing so hard because these two are just like a married couple. And
yeah, right.
It was just so funny.
Yeah. Yeah, and all the matron mothers are so fun to voice, and Brunner's such a gas, and
Thibbledorf Puent. I know you got to enjoy that one.
Yeah, Thibbledorf Puent is great. And the Boulder, what are they called? What are they called? The Boulder Shoulder Brothers?
Yeah, Ivan and Peichel.
Yeah.
What is up with Peichel, man? I mean, I know some things are just supposed to be the way they are, but seriously, what is his deal?
He's just he's like well, first of all, he's a druid, which
Doodad, you mean?
He's the only dwarf druid in existence, but he's just he's a what they call it, a savant. Basically, he's on the spectrum somewhere. He doesn't really talk. And
you stinking doodad.
Yeah. It's a great world. So, do you want to know about parkour?
Yes, definitely.
So I was working. I lived in LA for about 14 years, and I started working with at-risk youth out there. It was basically not because I was this great humanitarian, but because I needed a job, make extra money. And but then I started falling in love with the work, and I created this arts empowerment curriculum that really seemed to get kids motivated, and it was based on Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and it was about just getting kids in charge, getting kids to see their own, get in touch with their own personal narrative, and to see themselves as somewhere on the cycle of the hero's journey. And I really loved that, and I did it for about 10 years, and then I moved back to New York, and I started working with a nonprofit here, and I couldn't convince them to use my curriculum. They made me use theirs, which sucked. And so I was driving home about 13, 14 years ago. I was driving home from working with a really tough group of kids, and I turned on NPR, and there was a piece on parkour. And I used to have this recurring nightmare when I was about 4 years old that I was being chased by a T-Rex. And the only way I could get away was my arms would lengthen like a monkey, and I would push myself. And they started talking about, and it was one of those dreams that had a kind of really atavistic quality to it. Like, it was not just a dream. It felt way deeper than that. Like I was getting in touch somehow with my monkey roots. And anyway, so they started talking about a move called the Kong Vault in parkour, which is basically that, where you plant your hands and you bring your legs through. And I said, oh my God, that's what I used to dream. And then they started talking about how kids were getting the metaphor that by overcoming physical obstacles, they could overcome other obstacles in their life as well. And I just knew I had to do something with it. So The next day there was going to be a jam in Riverside Park in New York, and I hired a cameraman on Craigslist, went and shot the jam, and then I called my business partner, my writing partner. I said, look, I found something. I think this could be really cool. And we had a third partner that had an overall deal for developing reality TV ideas at MTV. And within about a year and a half, we had a show on MTV called Ultimate Parkour Challenge. And in the course of that development process, we started the organization. And then we've spent, the last 10 years building the infrastructure for the sport to really make it grow and be around forever and not just be a fad.
That's really cool. And David, I'm assuming David and Francis are still with you?
David is still my partner. And Francis at a certain point, so we were looking around because we created this organization and this global brand before we really had a business. So we were looking for what can we, it's not skateboarding. You can't sell wheels and skateboards. So we thought the most logical thing was shoes. So we started a shoe company we called No Obstacles, KO. And
Nice.
and then it was really, they were really popular, but you really realize you have great respect for why Nike gets to charge the kind of money they do for shoes, and when they only pay $5 to make them. And if you're in the business, you understand the level of loss you have to assume with a business like that. So it became very unwieldy, and so we just decided at a certain point to separate the companies. And Francis, he was the tough guy, and I mean that in a really positive way. He took one for the team, and he took over the shoe company, and David and I took the federations. And but we're still, Francis and I are still super close. He's still part owner of the company, and we do a lot of pros. We still, because how I knew David was working. He was working with my program, my curriculum. We needed more teachers, and he came on board, and he was amazing at it, and started taking it to kids with drug and alcohol problems and teen gang leaders. And so just because we had that background, we started sort of mentoring kids around the world virtually using parkour as sort of the vehicle. And so we still do a ton of pro-social stuff. We have a Peace Through Parkour initiative, and we have a huge, there's a program we really support heavily in Afghanistan, which is reaching, just hundreds and hundreds of kids. And we work with people across that region, in the MENA region and Kashmir, and then in the U.S., where we've got a business of basically setting up parkour programs for people, equipment line and teacher certification, insurance, and curriculum. So we're trying to, have a for-profit company, but a pro-social, which does a lot of good around the world.
I can imagine that young people dealing with stuff need a way to let out aggression in a positive way.
Yeah, and it's not, parkour is unique among extreme sports in that it's based in a martial art called parcours de combattant, which means the path of the warrior. And so it really is a mind-body sport. And you get a kid, it's not about jumping off rooftops. It really is about a progressive, learning a progressive vocabulary of movement, where the kids get changed because it's all about you and the obstacle, and how can you, with the skills you have in this moment, get over, under, or around, or through that obstacle, and in a safe way where you're not going to kill yourself. And then you're motivated to learn more techniques to improve your efficiency to get beyond that obstacle. So it really is it's transformative, and it a lot of times. There's so many stories we have with parents that we've interviewed they said they were really worried about their kid that never got off the couch, played video games all the time, didn't like any sports, and discovered parkour, and it changed their life. So, and it's a tremendously inclusive community, and nobody is shunned because when you go to a parkour competition, the boy or girl who's struggling the most is getting as much applause as the kid who's killing it. So it's been tremendously, as much as I believe in it as a business opportunity, I also, what's held us to it has just been how inspirational it is, and these kids are just amazing. They're
Well,
amazing.
it's a literal manifestation for something that used to just be a metaphor. It's like,
Yeah.
work it out, work it out, work it out. Well, how? Well, use your head, try to figure
Yeah.
out X, Y, and Z, this way and that. Well, now you can take that mindset, be like, well, you see what you just did right there. You see all these different things that you were considering, and you went that way, and look where you are. So
Yeah.
take that and just run with it, almost literally.
Yep, it is literal. It's the overcoming obstacles. It's almost too simple, but it works.
Yeah. And I can see how that could really contribute to just confidence and self-esteem,
Yeah.
and just all that, just because you just look back and look what you did. It's like, oh, yeah, I did that. And then just,
Yeah.
you can just kind of go from there. So I could really see how that could just be a catalyst for a lot of people at what was, for me at least, a critical kind of age, just because just by our very nature, there's a lot going on in the teenage years.
Yeah.
And to have a little bit of positive reinforcement like that, I'm sure that goes miles.
Yeah, and to find because I was never big into team sports. I played them, but I hated it.
Yeah.
And so I never really got that. It wasn't until my 20s that I started to really gain the kind of confidence you get from physical achievement, and it's a big part of me growing up, and to be able to offer another alternative for kids that's sort of more right for Gen Z kids. It's more self-expressive. It's not, there are competitions, but the nature of the sport is not competitive. It's collaborative, and it's just, it's great to be able to, provide that for people who wouldn't normally have that, because it really is. I mean, it's true. You get playing sports and doing well at them to some degree or other gives you physical confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, the difference between the way we act now versus, even maybe 100 years ago. It seems like stuff like this that isn't so competitive, but more supportive, is becoming more of a normal thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is really, really cool to me. I remember there was this video I found of this little kid who was trying to break a board in a martial arts competition. I don't know if it was a competition, but this kid was maybe 4 or 5 years old, and he could not break this board. And his instructor was saying, "You can do it, you can do it." And all the kids around him were like cheering and screaming. Then the kid's crying because he's so upset and embarrassed, and he does it, and everybody just jumps up out of their seats. And it was just such a cool video, because he's just such a little kid, but he could do it, but he didn't think he could.
Yeah. 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 It's a great thing. I feel very fortunate, and also, we've come through this period of where kids are so overprotected, and to be able to take risks that are somewhat, again, we try to minimize the danger, and we're very careful to have a progressive discipline. That's why we train our coaches, and we teach people to do it inside in a safer environment to learn the skills. But still, there's risk involved, and for kids to be able to take those risks and feel that, again, self-confidence, and not just boys, girls too, because there are more and more girls now. And we just did our big national championship we do every year in January in Tampa, and it's always a struggle to find enough women in the upper age groups to really have a full women's round. But we had in our 7 to 10-year-old age group, it was about 25% girls. So nice. In another 3 to 5 years, there's going to be real female competitors. I mean, it's going to be great. And we've done international competition in Turkey in 2018, and a lot of people from the Middle East, North Africa. We had 11 athletes come from Iran, and 2 of them were women.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
I see there's a push to get it put into public schools as well.
Yeah. And people are doing it in various communities, big in DC, and we're trying to get it into several other states. And then we have a program we work with that's actually for seniors.
Really?
That because it's been recognized as an effective fall prevention program, because number one, the first thing you learn in parkour is how to fall. And the other thing is its coordination and agility and stability and all those things. And so, yeah, it's in Alexandria, Virginia. It's called PK Silver, and they're a nonprofit, and they go out into senior centers and work with people to teach them how to move again.
Jeez, I didn't even know that's a thing. That's awesome. I was just looking at so there was the obvious psychological benefits, but then like what's the overarching narrative about kids these days? They're always sitting around not doing anything. I think it's even like one of those, oh gosh, what's it called? Like when they have the feel good government sponsored ad that advocates for some sort of buzzword like integrity or virtue or something, and there's the one where there's this kid sitting on the couch and he like calls the home phone and his grandma shuffles in the hallway in the background to answer it, and it's just him asking her for like a grape soda or something, and she looks at the camera like, what the hell? And if that's what everybody complains about, it's like all these kids playing Fortnite and that's how they're making their money, they're not going out and doing anything. Well, I hope nobody's complaining about this, because
they're not.
It's an avenue, and it looks like a physically demanding and tough and very risky, like you said, risky avenue, but life is all about taking risks, and more often than not you're going to fail. And if you can teach somebody how to literally fall with grace, then they can fall and fail with style in the future.
And again, it's not about jumping off rooftops, and done properly and taught properly. It's less dangerous than skateboarding. It's less dangerous than cheerleading. It's probably less dangerous than girls gymnastics. You know, it's most of the injuries you see are like a turned ankle or a shoulder, you know. So it's not this. I mean, you know, our motto really at this point is parkour for everyone, because it you know, at some level or another, everyone needs to learn how to move. You know, and we're because we don't spend a lot of time doing that. I don't know. I heard a statistic which I think has to be wrong, but that basically for every hour you spend, for every 2 hours you spend sitting, you lose an hour of your life. And I can't believe can't believe that's right. But the point is accurate, is that our bodies were not made to be sitting to the degree that we sit. Mm-hmm. And more when I record, I'm trying to stand more, because in Audible, they have these great desks that you can adjust. And because I spent a lot of time sitting in all the 300 audiobooks.
Oh, yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There was a French parkour movie. I think I just looked it up real quick because I remember watching it years ago. D13.
Yeah, just District B13. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, that's what it was. Is that representative of what you're talking about, or is that more like the Hollywood-ish bombastic kind of representation that you're pushing against?
I mean, that actually is starring a guy named David Bell, who's credited as being one of the founders of modern parkour. So I think that's a great film to watch. I mean, they did a Hollywood version recently called Brick Mansions, which was what's his name's that one guy who died from Fast and Furious.
Oh, Paul Walker.
Paul Walker. It was his last film, and that was a terrible film. But but yeah, you know, I can send you guys some videos. There's a great if you want to look at if you look at YouTube, something called WFBF The Scoop is our an indoor where you look at my YouTube page or my Instagram page. There's a really cool thing in a gym that we work with. Our championship in Turkey is World Parkour Championship 2018. You can find that on YouTube as well, and you see that it's not the stuff you see in banlieue 13, as they call it in French, District B13. That's there's certainly it's applied to entertainment, so it's a lot of stunt work. Mm-hmm. But that's a seminal film in parkour. That's really the first and one of the few successful at its level. It wasn't a huge hit, but it was a successful film. Most of the parkour films have tried to make have not been successful because they don't have they've made it about parkour rather than just having a story. And where when you look at the Bourne movies, that's what really all the chase scenes have parkour in them, and
yeah, Casino Royale.
Casino Royale was obviously, that was one of the first things that brought parkour to people's attention.
Because it was like the first scene, everybody's like, holy. Yeah. And it was also like a
crap.
renaissance of James Bond. There was a lot that happened for the franchise with that movie. So then everything else that was sort of caught in its gravity, parkour included, really did a highlight on it.
That guy, the black guy, Sebastian Foucault, he's the other guy credited with being one of the founders of modern sport. I mean, the original sport goes back to the early 1900s. In Martinique, there was a big explosion, a volcanic explosion, and this French naval lieutenant had to evacuate 700 civilians, and half were Europeans, half were natives. And he saw the difference between the way the two populations moved, and the natives were able to use things in their environment to help them propel them forward. And the Europeans were just like walking on the sidewalk, you know. And so that's actually how it began, and then it turned into a French martial art. And then in the early 90s is when it sort of popped up in Paris. This guy had been in the French Special Forces, brought it back and taught it to his son, David Bell, the guy in District B13, and then his son's friends, and they created parkour with a K. And then it really sort of took off on the internet when it moved to the UK and Eastern Europe.
I'm watching. I just googled UFP or WFPF real quick, and there's the Tampa Parkour Cup, and just a quick the preview of it. It's just some tumbles and a few crazy looking jumps. Like, how do you get that much momentum? Springing off your hands like that.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. And but you know, again, we have these qualifiers around the U.S. We have 10 every fall for that event, and you know, people at every level, and kids. We got kids coming from all over the country, and their parents coming, and it's a cool thing. And then usually, almost every parkour competition out there, there's a couple of tournament structures. So the first round is usually a speed round, because that's sort of the origins of parkour come from that. And then there's always a style round, where you get to just be creative, and that's judged. So
I'm wondering if there's a future in this where you could sort of compete, or maybe even supplant the American Ninja Warrior shows, just because, I mean, those are pretty cool also, just because the feat of physical fitness and what the human body can accomplish if you train it. And I mean, I need to go to the gym more, especially being in the military. I need to be much more fit than I am now, but for my benefit, I guess, I watch a lot of fitness YouTube channels, and a lot of I try to stay away from the bro signs, except for the ones that are purposefully funny, but a lot of them are trying to sort of take the narrative and establish that the body is very mechanical in nature. They want to refer to limbs more as levers than anything, because that's kind of how they act, and the way that the bones and muscles and everything interact to exert force. And I see shows like this, and I think that might go over a lot of people's heads, is like, whoa, look what she's doing, look what he's doing, going up that wall, or doing the ladder thing where they take the pole and they in the middle of the air just pop it out, pop it back in, they climb a ladder.
Salmon ladder.
Yeah, I could not do that in my wildest dreams, but I look at that, I'm like, that's amazing stamina and endurance and just raw strength. And I could see this sort of hitting that market, because people tune in and watch stuff like that just for the marvel of it. And
in terms of Ninja Warrior, it's definitely relatable. And a lot of the people who are on Ninja Warrior, they talk about training parkour in order to, train for Ninja Warrior. I think the difference is Ninja Warrior tends to be very specific challenges and they add some every year, but they're very specific challenges you're learning, and they're incredible, and you will be incredibly fit if you learn to do those challenges. Parkour is more about learning an overall vocabulary of movement that you can apply to any challenge, any physical challenge. And I do think parkour has a really bright future. There's a lot of talk, and I think it's going to happen in either 2024 or 2028. It will be in the Olympics.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. That's pretty certain that it's probably going to, originally they were talking 24, but I think it probably won't be till 28, which will be in LA.
Jeez.
So it's got. I think it's just that it's just beginning to hit the mainstream now, and now we've educated people within the movement. Now it's starting to educate people outside the parkour community to see it as really a lifestyle sport that has a philosophy behind it, that people can live the philosophy without necessarily doing the sport. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
About overcoming obstacles and seeing obstacles as opportunities rather than just a dead end. And
sort of externalizing all the everything you might have going on internally.
Yeah,
that's really cool. I hope to see that.
Yeah,
and it's only a few years from now. That'd be really neat to see.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Victor, it has been amazing talking to you. Again, I totally respect your voice work. I've been binging it lately. And once again, just listening to you has made me step up a little bit as well. So I appreciate you.
Well, yeah, this guy did mention that he cuts out the breaths or the inhales on his recordings now because it's something that you do.
Yeah, you don't want to cut out all of them. You got to be careful. You got to, sometimes it's okay to breathe. You are a human being. So.
And one more quick thing that I noticed was a word that ends in a D or T followed by a word that starts with a D or T is my worst nightmare.
Yeah. What's my particular is one of my hard when I'm really particularly is just a word that I always trip up on, and it's just funny. We all have our little bad noirs, but yeah, that's it. I mean, just the whole process of, and I find I've got to have good sleep, or I will make a ton of mistakes, because your brain is it's just interesting, because you see that your brain is really, it's reading your brain is a sentence ahead of your voice. You're already reading the next line before you get to it.
Yeah, you're right.
Totally true.
Anyway. Well, good, guys. A pleasure. And if you want to do this sometime in the future, I'm happy to get on again. I enjoyed it a lot, and you guys are great. And
we appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for your time. It was great to have you.
My pleasure.
Thanks, man.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Y'all too. Bye.
Bye.